I've done the first 3 turtles with the bristle brush, but of course you could use a softer brush, like this Taklon brush for that, especially if you were working with something that you needed to put a little bit more detail. Once again, just let the paint glide on the top, not really mixing it in to the paint that's down below. That will get a little bit easier once the paint has dried a little bit to layer one thing on top of another. But I'm impatient, so I don't want to wait for this to dry. I want to get it done. Okay, so I have my turtles pretty well established, and their background is behind them, and it's not going around them. So cool. We'll come back to these later. Now let's work on these trees a little bit. So in the trees, I'm going to be adding my darks first, so I'm not worried about putting that little bit of white there like I did with the turtles. The turtles, I wasn't so sure I wanted to differentiate for them. And, another thing I could have done is let this dry and then come back and even redrawn the turtles. That had been okay too. But in any case, so for the trees, I'm going to add a dark first. Dipping and dabbing and scrubbing around possibly. So I'm going to switch to the bristle brush, because remember, the bristle brush I can really abuse, whereas this soft brush, it's not going to take very much punishment. And if I was to just dab on there gently, that'd be okay. But if I'm going to be in there and going pump, 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 pounding on things, scrubbing around in things, doing whatever, I certainly want to switch to a bristle brush. This is also one of those cases where I'm not going to be mixing on the canvas, at least not at first. I am going to mix in my tray. And what I want to mix is I want to mix a dark. So now with the opaque paints, your operation is a little different. So if you'll remember on the watercolor paintings, I said that you could only get darker. You couldn't go any lighter because you had no white. So with the opaque paints, it's kind of the opposite deal, in that you want to start off dark and then you want to paint on top of it. So that puts all those darks into like the little nooks and crannies, and then you paint on top of it and it gives you that depth. Okay, so as you can see here, I've just mixed up a really dark purple using my ultramarine and my cadmium red. So now if I take just a hint of the yellow, just a hint of that, that's going to make a really nice dark. And if it was a little bit more towards the purple side, that wouldn't really be that big of a deal for what we're doing. If on the other hand it went a little bit more towards the brown side, that wouldn't be a big deal either. In fact, why don't I go ahead and take a clean brush, and I've got this nice dark here. I'm going to mix an area that's a little bit more brown, just by taking a little bit of the yellow like this, and now taking a little bit of this dark and mixing into it. And you can see I'm getting kind of a dark green. So if it's green, remember, go the opposite. Go a little bit of red. And you can see how that's browning it up right away. You don't see me mixing a ton of color in here, though. Just enough, just what I need. Don't want to be mixing giant batches of color that I'm never going to use. Okay, so in any event, I can still see my trees in the background a little bit, and they were so simple that, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. I figured, okay, we had a tree back here. Now, instead of, when I first drew them, you saw they were just basically these lollipops, these circle shapes. If instead I just pounce down on my paintbrush, pow, 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 pow. So if I've got sort of a general lollipop area here, just a general circle area, right? And you could draw that out, I suppose, scratching it out the way that I did. And just stay in here, but don't let it be so regular. Like here, come to the edge, but then come back. And leaving holes. You want to leave, if you really want your trees to actually look kind of, realistic, you want to leave holes, areas where the sky can come through. And take advantage of the fact that you painted that sky all at one time, and so it's going to be very natural. So you can see I have that same sort of lollipop tree as I had before, but this time I've got all these holes in it, and the edge is even a little bit more irregular. So this tree already still looks like it was trimmed. Here, we can mess it up a little bit more by making it even more irregular here and there, having it stick out. When I'm going to mix more darks, because I need more dark right now, I'm not going to worry too much if it's the exact same thing as I'd mixed before. It doesn't really matter. It just needs to be dark. If it's too purple, add yellow. If it's too green, add red. And you can see how I'm pouncing around. Pum, 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 pum. I would never, ever do that with a soft brush. Oh, don't let me lose those holes. I want to keep those holes. When we're doing this, we're kind of like making a tree sandwich, if you think about it. So here was our background, our first layer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add another layer in between. This layer, let's go ahead and do the trunk. And so I could use this guy right here, but maybe I'll go ahead and use one of my soft brushes because I don't plan on really hitting things hard. So here I've got my soft brush, and I'll go ahead and use that little bit of a brown that I had from before. Add that in, and just let it flow, right? Just let that paintbrush go, bending it. That way I can get it to go from being very fat, let's see here, very fat, to very thin, right? And everywhere in between. And when you're doing this, you just got to think like a tree. Once again, if you're going to think like sky, think like grass, be the tree. And you can see here too how I'm allowing it to just cut through the paint. And you know how a tree goes. You have your central trunk. That's going to be the fattest part. And it's going to get skinnier and skinnier as it goes out towards the branches. And we're not trying to draw every single branch in here. And if we want to switch to a skinnier paintbrush, that's all right too. But, remember with this, we're not trying to make a masterpiece. This is just an exercise to sort of get you going with this idea of opaque paints and how to manage that. It's also giving us so much practice in working with complementary colors and in working with darks and lights and browns. There we go. And each tree is unique, just like every tree. One thing you might do is you might want to follow the foliage. You see all those pounces that I did? I really didn't think about those too much as I did them, right? And so I got this nice random sort of pattern. And so you can see I'm always following where the heaviest parts were because, well, where the leaves are, of course, that's where the branches would be, right? So for instance, I've got this clump right here kind of hanging out in the middle of nowhere. So I might go ahead and take and put a branch right there, you see. Doesn't that make sense? And now, that clump has a reason for being there. Here's another clump, so I'll send it through there. Here's another area, so I'll send it through here and up into here, for instance. Those all make sense. Now there's all this area over here, so that's going to have something that's supporting it. So maybe off the trunk comes a big area like that, and even an area like this. Cool. Now, if we really want to make forms out of these, we've got to think about, well, where's our darks and our lights? Okay, well, let's start thinking about that now. Let's just have our lights coming in from this direction here. Boop, just like that. Kind of from the front, maybe, and kind of from this angle right here. Sure, why not? So if I do that, everything to this side would have to be darker, and everything to the other side would be lighter, right? So I can go ahead and start lightening things up. I think in this case, what I'll do is I'll just take some white, but I'll temper it with a little bit of that brown that I've got going on in there already. So it's the same color brown, so that way when I lighten it up, it's going to be very natural. And I don't need a lot of it, and I can just go ahead and lay it on. Remember, just like with the turtles here, I don't have to paint through really hard. Let that paint just lay on the top. See, and you might say, well, Mr. Coon, aren't you going pump, 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 pump with this soft brush? No, right? I was doing that with this guy right here, right? But you'll see here with this soft brush, I'm just laying that on, just touching it, just kissing it, boop, 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 just like so. That's okay. That's what a soft brush is for, right? All right. And thinking about here, okay, so it's more towards this end of things. And I might get a second little bit of detail as that's going by there. And maybe I don't have to do every branch everywhere, right? That's okay. Maybe even I can even just take, and since this soft brush here, you know how you can get it to be that really nice edge right there. You can see how I get that really sharp. I could take and just touch it, boom, like that, and I get this nice, skinny, straight sort of line. So who knows? Maybe there's a little something that's just living right there. Who knows, right? But I can get all those little details in just by the way that I use my brush. See that? Sometimes you might get a little bit too much paint in. Like that's a little bit too white, right? And you may, oh no, Mr. Kuhn, I've ruined it, right? Well, not necessarily. So on the one hand, it could be a happy accident. That might really be an area that pops a little bit. But on the other hand, if you wanted to temper that down, that's okay. You've still got your darks. Just come back. I've wiped off my brush and hit it with the darks again. Now remember not to blend it in. Just tap, tap, tap right there next to it. And there we go. Very natural. Okay, good enough.